Hello, today I'm joined by Professor Susan Harris-Rimmer at the 25th IPSA World Congress for Political Science. Thank you for joining us today.
It's my pleasure.
So, Susan, yesterday you convened a session on women's leadership.
That's right. We
Yeah.
were thinking about specifically women's leadership in international facing agencies. So women who are representing institutions as the face of Australia or the face of Turkey,
Right.
or the face of the other countries we were looking at, which was the Pacific Regional Forum and final one, which was Argentina, Brazil and Mexico. So it was a very global conversation. And we were thinking about what does it mean for a state to allow a woman to embody it in international negotiations. So it was really that question of who gets trusted to represent the state and how do you get to gender parity in state representation.
Fantastic. That sounds really interesting. What particular insights did you take, or did you think that there was a really interesting point that you hadn't thought of before?
Oh, many. So we had, so for example, Elise Stevenson from Griffith, she was talking about essentially some areas of representation from Australia that are still very low. And one of the areas was defence attaches, which is only 20%. But she was also talking about the rapid rise in ambassadorial appointments in DFAT, hopefully as a result of the Women in Leadership strategy. And contrasting that, I suppose, with the new political representation of a female foreign minister, a female defence minister, a female shadow foreign affairs minister, and a secretary, first female secretary of DFAT. So, all these kind of really big firsts, and yet maybe the everyday practice lagging a bit behind. But I think the most important thing was all the people's insights into why it mattered so much. The business case, I suppose, or the human rights case for why women should be allowed to embody the state. Firstly, it was that concept of real citizenship, women being trusted to embody the state as a full citizen. And we talked about the essentialism of national status, and the importance of diversity to actually represent the citizenry of that state, so that really the representation of the state should match what the citizenship looks like. But instead, we think it's normal for the elite representative people to look completely different to the general population. Our eye has been tricked over a long period of time to think that's normal. So the very interesting paper by Mariel Luca from Argentina was looking at the great political differences that quotas have made in those parliaments, but how it's not translated at all into their foreign ministries. So what's happening there? Why are women trusted to legislate but not to represent the state outside, and particularly not in strategic posts like Washington? So it was a very interesting discussion, but it was also, there was a happy aspect to it. There has been progress, and there's been a lot of struggles of a lot of women around the world to make that happen, and so there was a kind of a feeling of respect and acknowledgement of that, because these are the people that negotiate the treaties, that sign the peace agreements, that make security decisions. It's really important who they are. It's elite, but it's important.
Yeah, absolutely. And so why do you think we saw this disjuncture between women in these positions of leadership but then not actually seeing any changes in legislation?
I think it's really interesting. I think foreign ministries in particular, and defence ministries and reserve banks and treasuries have their own very strong bureaucratic culture. So there's a whole stream in this conference of feminist institutionalism where they really think about how gender plays out in institutional cultures. And what I think is you can make political changes that might be a little bit ahead of where the bureaucratic culture is. I see that in defence all the time. Maurice Payne making history all over the world, and maybe the Defence Department not quite catching up with where the mood of the population is. And having that legitimacy with the domestic population is really important. They have to be seen as legitimate by the citizenry that they're meant to be serving. They are public servants, they're meant to serve the public. So what I think is interesting about these leadership debates is it keeps bringing us back to who is the public and who, how are we really serving that public with our work? They're really deep questions of nation building, national identity, and deep citizenship. Yeah.
So it sounds like, we've come a long way, but there's still a lot to go for like meaningful change on the ground. Do you agree with that statement?
Absolutely, and also still we might have more women, but it's a particular type of woman. It's one of the common themes with the paper on Turkey, the paper on the Latin American countries, Australia and the Pacific Forum. And the Pacific regional paper was interesting because it was talking about the attempts of the Pacific Feminist Forum to have real diversity and thinking about LGBTQI representation in actual policy processes. But in a lot of the other papers, you saw that the elite women were still of a very narrow type. So there wasn't more intersectional diversity, so not more working class or migrant women. One of those issues was that their essential Australianness, for example, the Australian paper, was always in question if they had other intersecting issues. So I think if we want, it's not just about women, it's about a deeper sense of diverse women and diverse men in those institutions.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it means that we just should never remain complacent about what we've got and keep striving for more.
That's right, and take culture seriously.
Yeah,
really seriously.
Absolutely. Cool. Thank you so much for joining us today, Susan.
You
can access more interviews from the IPSA World Congress at www.internationalaffairs.org.au. Thank you.